So I see most of you have joined who were registered. So I will go ahead and get started. It is 2 o'clock on Thursday, March 11th. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's webinar is going to be something I think that is very timely. This past year, many people have been working remotely. And so one of our most seasoned HR professionals is going to walk you through some great information about managing that remote team. So I mentioned one of our most seasoned professionals, somebody I love working with, and many of you have her for your HR account manager, and many of you have heard her present before. So I want to introduce and welcome Cindy Williams. She's been in the PEO industry for over 15 years, and she's held a role as a director of HR in the nonprofit arena. Outside of that, she's worked over 10 years in operations and accounting with a manufacturing firm, and she does hold the highest levels of certification with the Society for HR Management, as shown there, the senior professional in HR, as well as the SPHR and the SHRM CP. So you have a person with a lot of information. Don't hold back on your questions. And without further ado, Cindy, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Sandy, and welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today. So I want to start out with just a little definition about a remote worker, because the remote worker is, we kind of think first it's somebody who's working from home, but it also could be somebody who is working from a location different from you, right? So they're not working at the same location with their manager. So think about it in both those terms, somebody who's working in an off-site place or somebody who's working at home. So one of the things that I think all of us are doing, we're doing it right now, right, is we're doing Zoom. And Zoom meetings can be kind of exhausting. And I think that there's a burden on us, those of us who run Zoom meetings, to think outside the box a little bit, do something a little different, just to get people focused, to get them ready to learn and to hear something new. So I'm going to practice what I preach. And what I'd like you to do is we're just going to take a moment, we're going to take a moment to be focused on this webinar and to take kind of a deep breath. And so I'd like you to kind of sit in your chairs with your shoulders and head and your neck supported. And we're going to do some deep breathing. But while you do it, I would like you to kind of imagine that your air is filled with a sense of peace and that you're breathing out calm. Breathing in calm and breathing out the stress and tension. So take a deep breath. And then exhale. Then do it again, and you're breathing in calm. Then we'll do maybe 2 more. So 2 more deep breaths. So I'd like you to consider, as we're going through this training, kind of how that felt. And if you think that that it made you feel a little more focused, just a little more ready to do something different. And I'm going to do a couple of things throughout the webinar, but steal them, use them for your Zoom meetings, because that's really the whole point. Is that I want to help you with learning to work with a workforce that is online a lot. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk about telecommuting. You move forward, Sandy. Thanks. We're going to talk about telecommuting, and then I'm going to give you 10 tips for managing a remote workforce. And again, remember, people at home, but also people who are just not working in the same place where you are. And basically what we're going to talk about, right, is we're going to talk about setting people up for success so that they can be successful in meeting the company goals, the needs of the business, getting their job done, and being an engaged and effective worker. So some statistics about telecommuting. is that 62% of employed Americans currently are working from home, and that number has doubled since mid-March. 59% of those surveyed would prefer to continue to work at home, and 41% would like to return to the workforce. And some of you may already be doing some of that, right? Some of you already may be bringing some people back. But I think that the pandemic may change how we work going forward. And one of the things that you will need to consider and kind of manage around is who wants to come back, who doesn't want to come back, how you feel about them continuing to work remotely, and then the safety, of course, of bringing people back. So I said I was going to give you 10 ways of managing a remote workforce. And number one is setting expectations. So things are harder, right? If they can't just walk down the hall, they're either working at an offsite location or they're working from home, and it's harder to connect. So in order for them to be able to meet expectations, some of the things that you will need to consider is to communicate priorities, to make sure that they understand what it is that you want them to focus on, to have those performance goals. I mean, these are things we have whether we're working remotely or not, but it becomes even more important when connecting is a little harder. Understand their availability and really think about, what kind of, when do you need them to be available, and make sure that that expectation has been set. What hours do you expect them to work? What time do you expect them to be available? That kind of thing. Keep them up to date on company changes, because that's now become a little harder too. And you might have been in a meeting they weren't in, and there's been some major change, and the burden as a manager or business owner is on you to make sure that they know. Make sure that they can use the technology, that they have the technology. And then also, for yourself, model the work-life balance. Don't send emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. Don't call them at 11 o'clock at night. We want to make sure that people understand that we know and we respect that they have a family life. And then we also want to make sure that people know and understand the strategic goals of the organization, how they fit into that, where the expectations are of them around those strategic goals, so that we're all working towards what the business needs. So number 2 is to adapt the length of the meetings. So it is hard to be on a Zoom call for hours and hours, right? It's very challenging. And we need to consider how long people can stay engaged, and when does it become a waste of time. If we move past that engagement period, then we're really not, we're really not being successful. We're not making any headway into what we need to do. And I had read somewhere that that we have an attention span of 8 seconds, which is less than a goldfish, which is 9 seconds. So it turns out that that's not at all scientific, but think about that when you're planning your meetings and you're putting together presentations, and put in some other things, like the deep breathing we did at the beginning. I would suggest that you have the video on. I know people don't love it, but I do think they're much more engaged when they can see each other and they know that they're being seen as well. 20 minutes and give them some kind of break, whether it's a joke or, tell them to get up and walk around the room, or maybe play a video. I really love looking for, just kind of funny videos on YouTube that have to do with my topic. And more than 55% of business professionals who were surveyed said that stories keep them engaged. So give examples and tell them stories. And a third say that some kind of visual stimulation is critical. So when you have people on screen, then you have some of that visual stimulation. So consider like speech making, use the same kind of techniques that you might use if you were giving a speech somewhere. So an example of something you can use is this conference call bingo. So it keeps people engaged, and it's things like, next slide, please, which we've already done. And things like you're muted and stuff like that. So it's just fun. It's something that they could do while you were on a call. And you could even, if you wanted, you could give some sort of gift card or something like that. But the whole idea is that you want these meetings to be really successful, and you want them to meet business needs. And so you have to think about the person. You have to think about the person who's attending and how they will respond and how they'll interact and how you can keep them more engaged. So number 3, go back one, please. Thank you. Number 3 is to be flexible. When do you expect them to be available? And this is especially true if you have people working at home. They might have children who are learning from home. So when can you be flexible? Can they flex their hours? Does it matter when they work, or can they, or do they need to be available, 8 to 5 by phone? So really ask yourselves those questions and not just assume, that it has to be business hours. There might be times when it doesn't, when they can do something a little different. So that, again, you can kind of balance and help them balance a work life, their work and their life and their personal life during a time when those things are challenging. This isn't normal, but at least we hope this isn't normal. There was a video that you can see on YouTube, actually, and it was a BBC newscaster. I mean, can you imagine you're on BBC broadcasting news, and his 2 little children came in and his wife came in after them running to get the kids. He was actually interviewed on the news about that. But, that's the kind of thing that people are struggling through, trying to stay focused on work, but yet, the kids are home. And then also, give people the benefit of the doubt, assume the best. And if they don't answer their phone, just don't automatically assume that they're taking a nap. They could be on another call. They could have stepped away for a minute, just you'll know as we talk about these things like the setting expectations and things like that. If things aren't getting done, you'll know, right? You'll know because you're staying on top of it. And so number 4 is to track their progress. And it's things like this that'll make it so that so that you don't have to believe that if they don't answer the phone that they're not working. So if you're tracking their progress, you're assigning them tasks that need to be done, providing some structure around it, giving them some deadlines, that kind of thing. And, trust the process. And what this means for you as a manager is that you need to stay involved, right? And this is true really whether they're working remotely or they're not, but that you need to stay involved. And if you're tracking their progress and you're in touch with them and you're keeping up with it, then you can be much more confident that they're being productive, that they're doing what they need to be doing, that they're working when they're supposed to be working. And then number 5 is communicate. And the communication is all that more challenging that we're not seeing each other face to face. So we have to make sure that we're communicating deadlines and resources and what resources they need, what resources are available, that we're, talking to them about the challenges that they're facing and the expectations. And, one of the things that we tend to do is that we listen with an intent to reply. So while somebody is talking to us, we're thinking, well, what am I going to say? What's my response going to be to this? And I would just challenge you, especially during this time when communication is so critical, that you're not doing that you're really trying to be present and listen to what they're saying and listen to what they're asking you. And then consider what methods you want to use. Do you want them to text you? Do you want them to email you? Do you want phone calls? How do you expect them to communicate with you, and how do you want to communicate with them? And be checking in with them and ask them what they need to be effective. I had also, in preparing for this, I looked around to see what other companies were doing. What were they doing to improve communications, to make their meetings and their interactions more effective? Because, at the end of the day, right, we have strategic goals to meet, and we want to make sure that our efforts are going towards those goals. So, I did some research. And there are, there's a ton of ideas out there about how to make meetings more effective and how to use a meeting to also not only consider them the worker, but also to consider them a human being who is struggling maybe right now too. So I saw some ideas around, like check-ins, like one-word check-ins that really didn't have anything to do with work so much, but just like, how are you? I saw some ideas with like high fives where people were given an opportunity to call out other people who had done something really well, or to ask them a question and maybe you come up with a question and then you ask them and then they pick the next person who answers the same question. And miscommunication during this time is just so easy. And I have an example actually of something that happened with me, is that I had emailed a coworker and asked them if they had responded to a client about something. And her response back to me was that she had been slammed all day and she hadn't had time to research. And so, but I knew that giving the answer was going to take some research. All I was really asking is, had she said to the client, hey, I'm working on this. So right there, just this one little simple communication. And I think the way she took it was that I was criticizing her that it wasn't done. And that's not the case. I just wanted to make sure that the client knew somebody was working on it. And if she hadn't responded, then I could, but it didn't want both of us to. But still, just the fact that she couldn't hear my tone of voice, that she couldn't see my facial expression, that all she saw was the email, it's just so easy to have a miscommunication. So, I mean, it's easy even when we are face to face, right? There's all kinds of tools out there about how to be better communicators. But really, in this day and time, it becomes even more challenging. And that YouTube video that I referenced there is a link to the meeting I was telling you about, where they were trying all these different things to keep people engaged, kind of check in on them. So listen, as managers, you really need to be good listeners. And when you really think about it, if you are not a good listener, what in the world are you missing that you really need to know in order to be successful, right? And to make sure that the business in your department is successful. So ask questions, listen to the answers. Again, I said it during communication, but be present. And when you're a good listener, that builds trust and it builds respect. People that report to you will have more trust and respect if they believe that you're really listening to them. Inquire, ask them about workload and progress and how they're doing. And again, be present and be listening, and try to kind of set aside that listening with an intent to respond that I mentioned before. Also, part of listening is putting aside your own ego, right? Not immediately thinking, how does this impact me? What does this say about me? But instead to just kind of be there and learning from them, right? When we listen is how we learn what kinds of things are not working, what kinds of things are working, where we can make improvements so that the company becomes a stronger, better, more profitable company. Number 7 is building connection. So particularly for people that are working from home, and also for people that might be working remotely and, like a one-person office, people are feeling very isolated, and people aren't robots, right? So we're social beings, and as much as you can as a manager to help them build connection, help them build connection to the organization, help them build connection to each other. This improves the employee engagement. And there are statistics and studies out there that say that employees who have friends at work are much more likely to stay. So for you, that means, that you're sharing positive feedback. You could do things like, let's have a cup of coffee together on Zoom, where that's exactly what you do. You just chat, have a cup of coffee. I have a client actually who does something like that. They do, it's a whole group thing. It's voluntary. People don't have to come, but I think they do it once a month where people can just get online and chat and have coffee. And, it's building that connection because it's good for the employees. It's good for you as a manager, and it's good for the company. So when people do feel connected, they're more likely to stay and to be engaged and get the work done. I also had a client who did something which I thought was a really cool idea. They sent out these little packages, you've maybe seen them, of s'mores. So it was a package of like, the marshmallows and the chocolate and the graham cracker along with a little tea candle. And then they had a fire pit chat together. So they all took out their little s'more packages, and again on Zoom or something like that. They had, a time to connect, a time to do something that just helps them feel more a part of the organization. The other thing that you could do is like assign a buddy, to assign somebody that for them to work with, for them to go to with questions, that kind of thing. And number 8 is collaborate. And where you can, think about projects that need to be done within your organization. And put together some small work teams, where they're working on a project that the company needs, that you need as a manager. It helps them with the building relationships and building connection, and it also gets something done, right? Because it's a project that's going to be completed. It helps build connection and gets work done. It is, give them some information around rules of engagement. How long do they have before the project is done, or they're returning messages? And ask how you can help. How can you support the effort? And again, I'm not suggesting that you put together a project team to work on something that doesn't need to be done. I'm suggesting that you think about some of the things that need to be done. Pick people on your team who would be good at doing that, and put them together. So number 9 is kind of a don't do as opposed to a do, but resist micromanaging. Again, if you do all the things that we just talked about, the building expectations, the watching their progress, to see what's happening, you'll know whether people are working or they're not working. I think for those managers who are listening, who are not used to having a workforce that isn't right there in the building, some of these things might have been challenging. But if you are doing these, if you are taking the steps that we've talked about today, I really do think you'll know whether people are doing their job or they're not doing their job. So you can also, just to not micromanage, but still be interacting with them and working with them, think about some kind of regular one-on-one. I had a client who was doing, I think they were doing evaluations twice a year. And they went to once a year, and then once a month doing a one-on-one check-in. So some of the things that you could be talking about, you could ask them, what part of their job is working for them well, what parts aren't, some ideas for improvement, talking about goals that they might have for themselves, or goals that they're working on for the organization. An opportunity to tell you what they're proud of. I think we all have things happen and think, oh, I wish I could tell somebody about that. I feel so proud. Ask for those things, call them out. Ask them what they want to talk about. What kinds of things that they feel a need to have your attention. And that's another thing about this, is that if you're doing a one-on-one, really pay attention, not be answering emails and other things at the same time. And then trust that if you're communicating and you're following the steps that we've gone through, trust that employees are being productive and they're doing their jobs effectively. And people who are not trusted become less trustworthy. So just think about that. If they know that, the flip side of that is if they know that you are trusting them, they're much more likely to be trustworthy. And then last but not least at all is celebrate success, right? When people are working from home or working, in a more isolated situation, that burden is really on you to look for that success, because when you celebrate success, people are more engaged. And when you don't celebrate success, right, there's a message there as well. And the message there is that it's not important and it doesn't matter. And when they do something really well, it's not important enough for you to take the time, right, to notice or to say something. So look for those opportunities. Look for the opportunity to see somebody doing something right. Celebrate, milestones, whether it's anniversaries or birthdays. There are all kinds of ways to celebrate success. You could send a note to their house. You could send a gift card. You could have somebody else call them, maybe a senior member of your team or the owner call them and say, hey, I heard that you did such and such. And I just want you to know that I noticed that, I know about it. Public recognition on calls to also mention that somebody did something really well. And there's all kinds of creative ways to do that. All kinds of ideas out there on the internet. I have more ideas too if you need them. But again, all of these techniques are a way to make sure that we are effectively managing a remote workforce, that we are supporting the business, that we're making sure that their efforts are supporting the business, because at the end of the day, right, it's about the bottom line and making sure that the company is successful. And any questions? I think you can put them in the chat or the Q&A, right, Sandy?
Yes, that's correct. I have to tell you, Cindy, somebody had commented, and I felt the same way, that opening was, a good thing. It felt good to stop and relax. And I relaxed a little too much and kind of missed the step with getting your slides advanced. So sorry about that, everybody. But that's pretty powerful, huh? We have about 30 people here today, and I'm assuming that most people, if not all of you, have remote workers. So this is a very good opportunity, if you do have some questions, to let us know about those. And then also, Cindy, I'm going to kind of jump in there. I would love to hear, if you are working with remote workers, maybe what are your biggest challenges, if you want to type that in there. We have today scheduled for another half hour, so I'm thinking let's take advantage of it if our participants are open to that.
Sandy, I'd like to maybe add to that too. Any ideas that you want to share? If there's something you're doing that's working for you, please, share it, because this is a challenge for lots of our clients. I'm talking to them often about managing a remote workforce.
Yeah, and I think for those of you who are with one of our clients, or you are a client, I should say, you have spoken to many of us in the position that Cindy and I hold, the HR account manager. So I know many of you are doing that. One of my clients they're always on the ball, and had written some really good guidelines so that employees understood, because oftentimes as managers, we do all the planning, we think about it, we kind of have time to digest it, and then we kind of just expect employees to understand everything when we just rattle off a few sentences. And so I thought that was one of the nice things I saw. It gave everybody a place to stand equally and understand, while this remote situation is possibly not ideal, the goal is that it's temporary. And that's, I would expect, Cindy, we'll probably start to see, once things are back to normal, hopefully that's a reality at some point soon, that we may see some people who don't want to come back to the office. So I'm pretty sure we'll have things like that to deal with along the way. But
yeah, I have some clients who have had some people so desperate to come back to the office that even though they really didn't intend to open it, that they did.
Oh, this is great. So somebody's asking, it's that same very prepared client. I should have realized you can now stop with the Q&A, Lisa. I'm only kidding. One of my favorite people. She says, how do we begin to plant the seed of return to the office?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And maybe one of the ways you can is to start talking about how they would feel safe coming to the office, like what things can you put in place. The other thing you can do is start to talk about what things you are putting in place. And I have a client that did that. Like their office is really not open. Only I think the owner and a couple senior people have been coming into the office. But they have started to tell the employees, hey, we have a hand washing station. They bought this thing she was telling me about that you can just stand in front of it and it'll take your temperature. You don't have to touch anything. So they've started to communicate to people that, hey, we've got this temperature taking thing. We've got a hand washing station. We've set this up. We've set that up. We're getting ready. So I think that's how they've done it. And then, of course, you can ask, right? Even like on your 101s, maybe that's one of your questions. What would it take for you to feel safe? I mean, would you feel safe once you're vaccinated? Would you feel safe, if you were just in one office or, things like that. But I think part of it is just to start talking about what are the things you are doing to make the office safer.
I think that's a great response there, Cindy. I'm also thinking along the lines of people may not be so concerned necessarily safety-wise because they know that their organization has put those things in place. So, in some sense, I'm thinking, although we don't, how do you incentivize somebody to come back to the office when they love possibly the flexibility and the ability to be autonomous from some other location? And, one, I would say, why not consider if it could be an ongoing thing, possibly not full-time, maybe it's something, your slower days, if there is such a thing, but, maybe once or twice a week. I have heard somebody talk about, all of the things that Cindy had said to set the stage, because once we start talking about something, we become a little more open to it, right? So as they start to think, oh yeah, that's going to mean I'm going to have to go back to the office. The more that maybe you get those conversations happening, it'll help pave the way. But basically, it could be a reward system if that's something you wanted to consider, if you found that they were effective. And I know again that the work that the client I'm going to have to face, she's going to give me a hard time, but in a good way. But part of what they had prepared for was that very thing. What criteria is required to be able to work from home? Did you meet all your deadlines, things like that? And Cindy and I could probably talk about this all day because we love what we do. And part of that is helping employees to feel good about where they work and to help managers to set that stage. So you all on the line have access to an HR account manager, to my knowledge, and we are always available to help you with things like this. So
hey, a couple other things. One thing that just came up with a client that you might be interested in is they were hiring somebody and everyone's working remotely right now. So they actually put something in the offer letter that said, we're remote right now, but we're not planning to be remote forever, said much more professionally, but kind of setting that stage. And then also just, the comment that was just made is they have people working sporadically, like a few days a week, and maybe the office isn't completely full. But again, it's to just start to talk about, let's add one more day, or, when we get back to full time. And then finally, Sandy hit upon the, consider whether they can continue to work at home. And I have some clients in Manhattan, and they've been working remotely for a year. And I think that eventually, what's going to happen is that they're going to start to consider the rent that they're paying, and whether people working at home might save them some money. So, that's also something that you can ponder, is whether smaller offices, less rental space, at the end of the day, wouldn't be better for your bottom line.
That's a very good point, that less overhead. And, there are a lot of studies out there that talk about people who feel that autonomy and flexibility in their positions are much happier employees, and happier employees generally are easier to work with, do better work, and generally create a good outcome for the entire company. So I can recall, just to tell you a quick story, years ago, as an HR director, I had a team of social workers who wanted to work remotely and really never have to come into the office. And, just by the nature of what they do, that makes a lot of sense because they went into people's homes. But my mind at that time was, are you kidding me? How will we know that they're going to get their work done? And how do we even manage that? And there is a great book out there, and I do not remember the name, but it's probably Managing Remote Workers. It's along those lines. But I really can't recall some of the things that were in there, but I found that at the time extremely helpful. And we actually went that route, and it was highly successful. I mean, it was, the stress of the job that these individuals did, it really helped their ability to deal with what they saw and dealt with. So, sometimes we are resistant, but, Cindy, you said it earlier. I don't remember how you said it, but, you have to think about how you perceive things and the decisions you make affect others in a way that may not be, the best way. And really, if you just kind of maybe change your mindset, right? Think about it. What if? It might lead to a great outcome that you hadn't realized was possible. So I think I'd like to share from our own team. We, and Cindy, you can attest to this. One of the things that, a lot of people kind of joke, there are a lot of great memes out there about Zoom calls. And, a lot of people, I read a statistic, something like 2,600%, there was an increase in online activity. And that's an interesting, where that came from. It had to do with fraud, the increase in fraud during this past year. A lot of people are online and a lot of people have a lot of time on their hands. So bad guys take advantage, and girls, bad guys and girls. But basically, I've totally forgotten what I was going to say. Oh, Cindy, we were talking about, oh, that's too funny. So seemed really good too. It was like how we could end world hunger, something like that. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's a time, who could have planned for this? Nobody. There are a lot of good things coming out of it, and some challenges, of course. But the idea of asking people what they think. Sometimes as managers, we think we're supposed to have all the answers, and so we're hesitant to show what might be seen as vulnerability to the people that we manage. And in fact, years ago when I managed a team, I had done that, and somebody said to me, well, you're the manager, you're supposed to tell us. And my logic then, and still is, well, that's true, but it's very one-sided, isn't it? Even though I may do what you do or know what you do, I don't do your job full time. And I believe those people are the ones who can oftentimes have the best answers. You might want to frame the conversation with, hey, I may not be able to do any of the ideas that you provide, but I'm certainly open to hearing what you have to say. So, in what Cindy was talking to further elaborate on that about concerns, you may find that the concern has to do with childcare. Well, did you know, as a AlphaStaff client, one of the things that you have is access to the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. And there are resources for childcare and even elder care, financial resources, legal, all kinds in that package that is entirely free to every client and their employees. So, it's a time, I think it's been tough because nobody's really had time to be creative, right? We've been putting out fires left and right. And it's kind of like thinking the glass is half full. So Cindy, I'm going to turn it back to you if you wanted to have some closing words there. I don't see any more questions.
Okay, great. I just want to...
Actually, I'm sorry, and Cindy, you may have said this. I think you can see the chat too. One person said we have rotating office schedules, and maybe we could expand those to add more days, or they ask the employee if they want to add more days to work from home.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing. We're just starting to talk about it. We'll add one more day, and just starting to get people comfortable. If they're already pretty comfortable coming in at all, adding to that shouldn't be too hard, except that people might miss it. So you have to kind of consider that as well. And whether they have to, maybe this could be your new normal, that they work a couple of days from home. So that's really a business decision to make. And I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar today. Thank you, Sandy, for moderating.
Sure.
And your HR account managers are here for you if you need anything.
And Cindy, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and expertise, as do I'm certain everybody on the call does. The hiccup in my thoughts had to do, and I'm going to throw it in there, is how we as a team, our HR account managers, have been weathering this through Zoom. And I have to tell you, I've worked with AlphaStaff for 10 years, and I know every single team member, feel close to them. But this past year on the Zoom calls, even though it's electronic, I think we really grew as a team. And we got to see a more personal side, sometimes, at least where I'm concerned, maybe too personal. I'm one of those hard on the sleeves person. You can read me, what mood I'm in, but great team. I think we're stronger than ever. And if you're not using Zoom, you really might want to look into it. If whether everybody comes back in the office or not, there are some cool things. We did an happy hour one time, and after hours, of course, but that was pretty fun. We've done birthday celebrations and so on. So it's, again, it's looking at the opportunities. So again, Cindy, thank you, and everybody attending, thank you. I do want to point out a couple things. If you did want a copy of today's presentation, you have a few ways to get that. Two of those are on the screen, hrsc@alphastaff.com or 888-335-9545 number, or through your HR account manager. If you were looking for the credits for the two HR associations, you can get it that way as well, or get those credit IDs. And then lastly, if you have employees in the state of California and you are not aware that there are mandates for anti-harassment and discrimination training, there are, and we provide this training. It's a 2-hour course that's 2 p.m. Eastern time, and our own Amy Brown, well-credentialed HR account manager, will be presenting that. So I've had people actually attend that aren't in California, and they said that they learned quite a bit, and they thought it was valuable. So it's not just limited to California. It's an awesome time. Believe it or not, Amy makes it not feel like 2 hours. And I've been in many of those, and I'm completely blown away each time, because it's a great opportunity to remember some of the things that maybe you think but maybe your employees don't. So please mark your calendars. That's next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you, everybody, again, and take care out there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome.